Hey, Deserving listeners, I'm going to continue watching Ginger Snap's account of Jeramey, which I believe is Jeramey from Love is Blind Season 6. I didn't realize that watching these TikToks would provoke me to talk about a lot of intimate partner violence and domestic violence clinical things. Let's continue watching this. This video will be for members only, but I will have a free portion for y'all.
To get home. We end up getting home and all hell breaks loose. We get into the bedroom and fighting starts immediately. And it escalates to the point that he actually puts his fist through the wall.
That is pretty classic as a massive red flag for intimate partner violence. It's not a guarantee that that will grow to that, but the way that intimate partner violence, domestic violence progresses is that typically, not all the time though, but typically there will be a progression. It will get more intense as things move forward in a variety of ways, not just violence, but in gaslighting or in emotional abuse or control, these kinds of things. Like it could start with saying, I don't want you to go out with your friends and have a beer. I don't want you to leave the house for an hour to go to a birthday party. It could start with that. But then down the line, it's, I don't want you talking to anyone except for me. It can start with a fist through the wall, and then eventually it can be a fist into your face and beyond. So it looks like we might be hearing that.
And I'm a little taken back because this person, if you know this person from the show, you would not think that they would be like this, especially if you know them in real life.
I don't have any markers of personality or the way someone looks that tells me whether someone is abusive or not. In 10 years, it'll be a different label, but today it's all about narcissist, narcissist, narcissist. And I think that's the new word that people will use for a variety of folks, but I think it also includes abusive people. And the way that these people are talked about, it seems like they're very easy to detect. They're not. Whether it's a narcissistic personality disorder or an abusive person or both. No, you could meet someone, they could be very, very kind, they could be very, very nice, genuinely nice, and have this problem. So that, there's no way to tell. But anyway, so she's saying, you might not be able to believe me because he might come across like he's not that sort of person, but there is no that sort of person.
Like when I tell you, I have never seen someone snap and just flip like that to a totally different person. Y'all, it was like something I've never seen before.
Yeah, and getting back to my earlier conceptualization, I don't know, but typically what's happening is there's hurt and worry, attachment, insecurity that is being triggered. It does not justify it. It doesn't mean that you have to soothe it. For me, when I detect that someone has attachment insecurity due to the abuse or abandonment they went through growing up, and they are being abusive to me in my personal life, I run. I feel bad for them, but I'm not their therapist, and I'm not here to martyr myself because of a transgenerational pattern of abuse or abandonment or harm. I can do that at work as a therapist. I will work with clients, and they will sometimes abuse me verbally and emotionally. And I will sacrifice in that way, but I will not in my personal life. So I just want to get that out there. But my main finding when I look into these things, when I hear this, is that he was having he's easily triggered. It can even literally be PTSD or complex PTSD, meaning that you have a trigger and your distress goes spike. It just skyrockets. You go from 0 to 100 in the blink of an eye. It's also possible that he was becoming more and more distressed over time, but he suppresses it and tries to control it, and then it becomes too much. So, there's various different experiences that I'll hear from people.
And the rage was terrifying. So I ended up sleeping out in the living room that night. The next morning, I am mortified because obviously my brother's in the next room, so he's hearing all of this. I am so embarrassed. And they end up leaving the next day.
Yeah, and that's one of the terrible things about being a victim, is that there's this sense that it's kind of your fault, or how could you be with this sort of person? And we need to change that. the fact that she was embarrassed about Jeramey's behavior or Schmeramey's behavior, she should not be embarrassed by it at all. It's not her fault. Even if she sticks around with him, people do that. They have hope, or they're told things that sound believable. The reason why I say is, the embarrassment is unfair, but also that embarrassment leads to victims isolating themselves from support, not telling others. And then the abusive person can really get their hooks in.
So obviously things are tense in the morning. They leave. We sit down and talk things out, and we work out a solution of how we're going to avoid this happening again in the future. And a few months go by and things are pretty good. And then another fight breaks out. And this time.
Okay, so she says that they had a conversation about avoiding it happening again in the future. Now, this happened 10 or 11 years ago for her, so it's hard to imagine that she remembers all the details, and even the details that she does remember, it's hard to imagine that they're super accurate. So we just have to think about that. Having said that, if you go through an experience like this, sometimes these events become burnt in your brain, because the way our brain works is that under stress, sometimes a memory process can really make sure that you catalog every detail, or at least as much of the details as you can, so that you remember to avoid this situation in the future. Anyway, so what she's saying is that they had a conversation about avoiding it. And here's a little tip for y'all. If this happens, regardless of the situation, but particularly if it's abusive, is the plan has to be very robust. But even if it's not abusive, right? Even if you just had like a misunderstanding that led to the two of you really arguing about something, right? Typically what people will say after, in my observation, and on these reality TV shows, is they'll say like, "Oh, I'll just never do it again. I'm so sorry." Like the way that Jeramey apologized to Laura at the dock. He took full responsibility. He seemed to not be blaming anyone else, except for he said, "I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong." I was still curious as to what exactly he thought he did wrong, though. And like there was nothing that helped me to know that he knew what really happened. Like if he said something like, "Well, when you were saying that thing, it did bother me. It didn't justify what I did, but that bothered me," or "I was misinterpreting what you're doing," or "What were you doing that, this is what I saw, but what was happening with you?" There was no conversation along those lines. It was just like racing to the end when he was apologizing, right? It was just like, "I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." You just wonder, what was that about? Was that just trying to avoid the whole thing? Is that the way he tends to apologize? We could imagine that there tends to be a pattern with that. Who knows? But anyway, the kind of response that you would hear from an abusive person that I would say would justify thinking you have optimism about the future is if they say, "I have a problem with my anger. I have a trigger regarding jealousy or worry that someone's going to leave me. It's because of the way I was raised and the things that I saw. My mom was abusive in this way, and I absorbed it, I think. And I will go down a very dark road very quickly. When I saw you talking to that guy, it's not your fault, but I went to a very dark place and I became very, very upset very quickly, and I was panicking and had all this adrenaline, and so I went to you. I don't know, in my head I thought I would just get you to stop talking to him, or I just was trying to survey the situation, and then I got more triggered and I started saying stuff to you, and then I was so distressed, I was just out of my mind, that I thought I was going to do something horrible. So I jumped in the car and I went home because I didn't know what else to do. To be honest, I was also really, really angry at you. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything bad, but I was really upset. I have an issue. I know where it comes from. I've been to therapy. I have a lot of self-awareness. I have ways of dealing. Or sort of a lesser version of this would be, "I'm so sorry, and I don't know what happened there. I got really upset though, and I want to look into this. Maybe therapy, or I'm going to watch some videos, or I'm going to listen to some podcasts. Or I've done this before, and I don't want to do it again. And in the past, I would say, I'm just not going to do it again. But that doesn't work. I'm sorry. I don't have that kind of self-control. But I want to begin looking into this because something's going on there. I think it has to do with my childhood. That would be okay, too. I would have some optimism. It's not a guarantee of anything, but there would be some optimism. Typically what I hear and what we saw from Jeramey at the dock is, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. I'll never do it again. Let's move on. That's nice. It's a beginning. But even if someone is sincere when they're saying that, they're sincerely taking responsibility, they sincerely are remorseful for it, and they sincerely believe that they're not going to do it again, I would not trust that in the least. Because nobody wakes up in the morning and says, oh, I can't wait to, as an option, do that thing that I did. By implication, it's like, oh, okay, so now you know that you don't want to do that. So before that was an option for you, and now you're like, oh yeah, I need to cross that off my repertoire. No, it was not on your repertoire to begin with. It took over, right? And so all of those factors are still present. And even if you had been through a year of therapy, the chance that the factors would no longer be present, it's not likely. I would treat perpetrators, and the amount of things that we would have to work on, it took years and years. The amount of self-awareness, that can go fairly quickly. But the ability to even know your emotions, because typically these folks, given their upbringing, have almost no awareness of what they're feeling. And in order to regulate your emotions, to avoid becoming so distressed that you have no control, because once you go past a certain threshold, nobody has control. The most mature, myself, no one has control past a certain threshold. The key, though, is to notice as you're coming up so that you can intervene. People that never lose control, it's not that they never, it's not that they're not capable of getting to an 8 or a 9 out of 10. It's that they're very aware of their inner feelings, their emotions, their reactivity. They are attuned to their body and they notice things. Oh, what's happening? Or they know, oh, these situations tend to make me feel this. What's happening in my body? What am I feeling? What are the senses that are running through my head right now? What are the urges that I have right now? They notice that at 3 or 4, and they have effective ways of regulating those emotions. But if you don't even know your emotion, you can have all the techniques in the world to regulate emotion, but once you get to an 8, it's too late. So connecting neurologically with your emotions takes a long time. For children, it takes years. And for adults that have never been through that, our brain is less plastic, and so it takes even longer. It takes a long time. So I'm just wondering what kind of conversation they had.
It escalates to where I'm walking away, I'm trying to get away, and he's just following me around the house, in and out of different rooms. I'm shutting bedroom doors, and he's banging on them, trying to get in, and I'm finally like, I'm just going to leave the house.
Okay, we're here, and I'll stop yammering, but we're hearing pursuing, right? Not respecting her wishes. She's probably saying, leave me alone. Just give me a second, or stop, and he's invading. That's a pretty classic abusive behavior, a huge red flag. It's not necessarily abusive. You can have preoccupied people or pursuing sort of people, or maybe they just think that's what you're supposed to do in a situation like that. So it's not a guarantee, but given everything we're hearing out of anger, out of the need for control, I want to remind everyone that my top hypothesis when I hear all this is that the individual that is doing the abusive behavior is not trying to be abusive. They are flipping out. They are triggered. And their way of reacting to that intense, overwhelming emotion is to try to control. And it makes some logical sense. Of course, it's abusive and awful, but they're thinking, if only I can get you to shut up, right? If only I can control your actions and your mind and your words, then I will feel better. It's kind of true, right? If they could wave a magic wand and say, you will now forget what happened, and you will not talk to any other men, and you will hug me and listen to me right now. If they had a magic wand, it would work. If they had that magic wand and the person's ding, and they come over, they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. The person would go from an 8 or a 9 down to a 4 or 3 or something. because a lot of times for these individuals, they never get to a 1 or a 0. They're in a constant state of hypervigilance or worry or pain or something. And so it's true. And that's the fantasy that they have. I just need to get to you. But it's abusive. I'm going to invade your space. I'm going to tell you what's up. I'm going to isolate you. I'm going to yell at you. I'm going to intimidate you. So I don't know if that was what's happening, but that would be my first hypothesis to explore.
Now, I have 0 family where I live. And so I ended up calling his stepmother. And I explained to her what was going on. And I was like, I need somewhere to go. So she's like, girl, come on over.
So that's a good sign. It's a bad sign that she didn't have any family to go to. But it's a good sign that she took action. Other people who perhaps have been modeled more of that behavior, like if her parents were that way or she had been abused before and didn't have any way to get out, you can imagine other people sticking around saying, I'll just please him, or I'll freeze, or something. But she had enough agency to get out. Now, maybe she has a history and she's recovered sufficiently enough such that she doesn't screw around when it comes to getting to safety. But that's a good sign.
Got you. So I go to her house. This whole time, he is blowing my phone up. It won't stop. So I finally get to her house. I get inside. She pours me a glass of wine. We sit down and I start going over what's happened. And my phone is still blowing up.
Now, the worry is that if he knew where she was, he would feel like he could just barge in the house, right? Because it's his parents. But that's another hallmark, right? That he's chasing. Okay, so just chiming in here. This is the end of the free portion. And if you want to watch the full video, you can become a member of this channel by clicking the join button, and you'll get access to this full video along with all the other member exclusive videos. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.